For the skirt section of my Christmas dress, I'm going to be using my circle skirt pattern cutting and sewing guide, which I've got as a paper pattern. I've already drafted this out, and I'm going to be using it with my own bespoke bodice, which I did in a video. I shall link that below and as a card. And this needs a little bit of adapting because the front of my Christmas dress has this really lovely sweetheart sort of squared sort of neckline, and I'm going to be using this McCalls pattern 7900 as a template and to add a button stand. The button stand is just for show really, because the dress is going to zip up the back to make it easy to wear. So I'm going to use the McCalls pattern and basically bung it on the top of my bespoke bodice and just trace through that neckline and the button stand so that I get that same front effect that I really like. The rest of the bodice I'm going to just do as I would normally. I'm not going to use any more of the McCalls pattern. Make sure whenever you make any amendments that the shoulder line is the same so that the back and front bodice still go together really neatly. I drew on the new neckline, and then best thing to do is just hold the pattern up to yourself to make sure that the proportions work, because sometimes when you transfer a pattern, even though the proportions actually work on the original, it might not on the new one. So I've decided that the neckline does need to go down a little bit lower to make it a little bit more va-va-voom. And it was only a little bit that I needed to take off. And initially I thought I was going to do a facing on this, but I ended up deciding to just fully line the bodice so that I would get a lovely couture effect. I was gifted this really beautiful fabric from Minerva. I am a Minerva brand ambassador. This gorgeous brocade in metallics and black was just so breathtakingly beautiful, and I'm really excited to make my dress out of this fabric. And it also has the Loki seal of approval, because if he plonks himself on a fabric and starts cleaning, I know it's going to be a winner. And I've got this lining. It's not really lining, it's a satin. It's also from Minerva from a very long time ago, just a bit left over in my stash. So I'm going to line the bodice with this. When it came to cutting out the pattern, I was hindered by Loki as normal, but also the fabric was a little bit narrower than I needed it to be. So I had to do some piecing, especially on the skirt, which has a lot of volume. So I folded up the bit that didn't fit and just added a seam allowance there, and then recut this little folded panel piece on some spare fabric and then sewed it together. You really can't see it in the finished dress, and it's a waste not want not kind of situation. I wasn't able to cut out the longer sleeves either that I had wanted, but actually in the end I didn't really mind too much, although I'd like to make this dress again, maybe in a corduroy or a velvet with the longer sleeve option. So once I've cut out all the pieces, the first thing I do is pin everything that needs to be pinned, such as darts, any gathering stitches, any pieced bits or panels or seams. Everything gets pinned in one go, and then I sew those pieces all together on my trusty Bernina machine, which is a bit of an old lady these days, but honestly one of my favourite things that I have. She's getting a little bit temperamental, and I'm just sorting out the pedal. Pedals tend to be one of the things that go first on these older Berninas, and I've had to replace it once, and very kindly a friend of mine repaired the pedal for me, stripped it down and re-jiggled bits. Technical term that I don't really know what was done, but it does work, as you can see. So everything gets sewn as it needed to be sewn. and then neaten the edges as you prefer. So I tend to overlock, but actually on a special dress like this, I would normally bind the seams or do something that was of a more couture standard. But because of the way a circle skirt works, I just used the natural selvage of the fabric, and I really like that. I think some people probably object to that, but having looked at a lot of 1940s and 50s extant examples of dresses, they often utilised things like selvages and so on as the finished edge of seams. So if it was good enough for them, it's good enough for me. And then really I was losing the light, so I had to stop at this point because basically I couldn't see, and if I can't see, then probably you can't see. So I resume again in the next couple of days. With the bodice and the skirt both completed, the next stage is to sew the bodice onto the skirt. Now, I had already bagged out the bodice with the lining and done the buttonholes because that needed to be done, because the centre front is finished and completed, and it's the fastening in the centre back that needs to be completed. So I had to leave a little section of either end, as you can see here, of the lining unsewn to the skirt, but the actual bodice and skirt was still sewn. So I just had to snip a few centimetres into that seam lining, and that means that I can sew the zip in and then just top stitch down the lining in place once the zip is in, and sew on the buttons. I just overlocked around the hem and just turned it up and top stitched it in place, and I did the same on the cuffs of the sleeves. And then my Christmas dress was ready to swish about in, and I'm absolutely thrilled with the result. The fabric was really lovely to work with, despite being a metallic fabric. I just used a size 14 needle and that seemed to do the trick. The fabric's really comfortable to wear. It is a little bit big on the front, but I'm just going to move that button over. And the shoulders have got amazing poufles. I didn't need to put a shoulder poufle inside to make the sleeve head stand up more. It's a really flattering shape, and actually the fact that I did shorter sleeves doesn't bother me at all. And here it is styled up with a vintage bag and a cardigan that I found in a charity shop or thrift shop just a few days ago. I hope you've enjoyed spending time with me while I make my Christmas dress. And if you haven't subscribed, then please do. It would be lovely to have you here. I hope that you have a wonderful Christmas and festive season and New Year. And I'll see you here for more sewing adventures.